a willing touch. A willing touch. Humans, at least when everything is working as it should, we all possess 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. All of them are important to our existence in and understanding of the world around us. While they are all important, and I wouldn't want to be with any, the sense of touch is one that places us into direct contact with our world. While I've heard of people losing some and some all senses, I've never heard of a person losing their sense of touch unless it is due to injury. Can you imagine not being able to touch your world? Can you imagine not being able to touch those you love? David Linden, a neurobiologist at Johns Hopkins, an author, a book called Touch, The Science of Hand, Heart, and Mind, says you can't turn off touch. It never goes away. You can close your eyes and imagine what it's like to be blind. You can stop up your ears and imagine what it's like to be deaf. But touch is so central and ever present in our lives that we can't imagine or replicate losing it. For if something doesn't look right to us, our first instinct is to reach out and touch it. According to Johns Hopkins Hospital, most of our sense of touch comes through the external stimulus by way of your skin. So how does a quick journey from the touch receptors in your skin to your brain happen? So when the touch, pain, or heat sensors in your skin are stimulated, or simply that when you are touched, they send an electrical pulse to your neurons. Those are special cells that relay electrochemical impulses. The sensory neurons then act as a relay team, passing along the electrical pulse from neuron to neuron until it reaches your spinal cord. And your spinal cord takes the incoming signal and sends it to your brain. Once the brain receives the signal from the spinal cord, it translates the electrical signal. However, how you feel about that action is because of the psychology behind your sense of touch. You probably already know a hug from a loved one can lower your blood pressure and make you feel valued and important. A firm handshake from a friend can create a connection. How you perceive the hug or handshake, along with how your touch receptors receive the pressure, is rooted in your brain. Your sense of touch is not only related to your nerve endings undergoing stimulation, the way you interpret the touch is also important. Well, Johns Hopkins Hospital was a little behind as it relates to the psychology behind touch. Because as we have read and continue to reread, God taught us something about touch in the story of creation. Well, we read in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, it says that the Lord God formed, or he touched us. He formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul. God formed man with his hands. Just like a potter with clay, he touched us. And in our text today, this particular miracle was recorded in Matthew and Luke, as well as Mark. Now, the Gospels speak to different audiences, have different themes, different writers, different styles, and different emphasis. But all of the synoptic gospels recorded this event. In the gospel according to Mark, Jesus is the servant of God, written with the Romans as the primary audience. Rome ruled with an iron fist. The Romans were a people that believed in power and action. In Mark's gospel, Jesus lays aside the regal robe of kingship that we see in Matthew and girds himself with a towel of service or servanthood. He is king in Matthew's gospel. He is servant in Mark's gospel. And since the Romans were about action, Jesus backed up his words with action. So they, the Romans, wanted to know, is Jesus able to do the job? So as we enter our text today, we see that a leper came to Jesus beseeching him and falling on his knees before him. We have to stop at leper. Leprosy was an infectious disease which attacked the skin and the nerve endings in the body. The disease caused lesions, and in these times were not treated and deemed incurable. Leprosy separated the leper from society, including their family. And they were forced to live with other lepers. And as recorded in Leviticus, they were required to cry out to anyone who approached them, unclean, unclean. Symbolically, leprosy was a picture of sin, and many people considered it to be a direct result of some sin committed. This man not only had to deal with the effects of the disease externally and internally, but he also had to cope with the social and religious implications of this disease. Richard Trench, 19th century archbishop, wrote concerning this text. He said, leprosy was nothing short of a living death, a corruption of all the humors, a poisoning of the very springs of life, a dissolution little by little of the whole body, so that one limb after another actually decayed and fell away. But he noted, but then the leprosy left the man, not in obedience to any skill of a physician, but purely and merely through the goodwill and mercy of God.